Sometimes Danny, no?
There we go. So thank you very much, Farzeen. We're starting the meeting
Right on time. Yeah.
And I'm happy to see you all here tonight. We're talking about the science of spirituality. And it's nice to see some people here for the first time. Who's here for the very first time? That's right. That's the only one. And so we're talking about the science of spirituality. And I thought today I would read to you an email I just got. I got an email, and it came from Rainn Wilson. Some of you know Rainn Wilson. He's the actor that's in the TV show The Office. Is it finished yet?
Yes,
It finished.
When did it finish?
A month.
Yeah.
Finished a
They
month ago.
finished this.
But I think it was 9 or 10 years, and he was the person that played, what was his character?
Dwight.
He played Dwight. I don't watch the show. And Rainn Wilson was very successful as a producer of other television shows that he does for the Oprah Winfrey Network. I don't know if you know Oprah Winfrey started her own network a few years ago and went from billions of viewers to a few thousand or so. I don't know, it's not doing as well. Cut that from the video when I say that. That's a joke. But she won an Emmy Award last year for a program she did called Super Soul Sunday, where every Sunday she has something on spiritual topics. And Rainn Wilson's company called Soul Pancake produces those segments, and those segments won an Emmy Award. So he feels pretty good about his company. I think they have 11 employees now. They started with nothing, and they produce internet content which has hundreds of thousands of viewers now, and so on if you look at them. And so Rainn Wilson started attending lectures that I was giving in a place in Los Angeles for about 37 weeks. I was giving talks somewhat similar to this. And so he asked me if his company that produces these Oprah Winfrey shows, if they could publish a book written by me. And I said, sure, I'll write the book, no problem. I had 37 talks, which I can show you here. Anyone wants to look. And if you just printed them out, they're probably between 500 and 1,000 pages. And so for a long time, I've been struggling to write this book for Rainn Wilson. And finally, he wrote me a long letter. And so I want to read you the letter. Because basically he's writing the book for me. It's very clear what he's doing. He's not really
I thought he's firing you.
He's not going to fire me. Because the reason he's not going to fire me, I guess, is because he knows, more than most people, how hungry the public is for spirituality. Because he sees Oprah interviewing people like Deepak Chopra or Eckhart Tolle. Do you know some of these authors? And they'll sell several million books. And I think Deepak Chopra sold 8 million of one book after Oprah had put him on the TV show. And so he knows that people are hungry, not just in America, but throughout the world, for spirituality. And I like to think of it this way. In one of the statements in our faith, it says that materialism is like cancer. Have you ever heard that analogy before? That materialism is kind of like cancer. It grows. And do you know what happens when you get cancer?
You die.
Well, but it's hard. It's hard to get rid of, isn't it? I'm sorry?
You get sick.
You get sick, and it attacks every part of your body. So that's the same when you get materialism. Materialism is also the same. And when you see the people in the world, you see your young people and your youth, and they get caught up in material things and material pleasures, and whatever, it's just like a cancer. And it's a cancer that's spreading throughout the world now. So if I just recently went to New Zealand, and I also talked to some people that were from Africa that I visited. And in both cases they said that the worst of American culture is taking over the islanders of New Zealand. They're all trying to have tattoos and wear low pants and get like gangsters in America, because the culture of America is spreading throughout, and not the good parts of it, the very materialistic parts of it. And in Africa, they said, even in the village of Africa, and it's almost like materialism is spreading its tentacles throughout the world. And it's eating into the hearts of our children and ourselves. We see it in the movies. We see it in everything we do, we find it. And so, as a result, there are many people that really are crying out for something more to life than materialism. And this is why Rainn Wilson wants me to write this book. So he writes it, and so now I'm going to read you what he wrote, because he basically has analyzed the book, and I want you to tell me if he's right, if this is the book I should write. Okay, because, so I'm going to market test you with his letter, and you tell me if this is any good, if this is the book. And when he gets to a certain point or something, he says something, I'll tell you what I would probably write. So he says, great talking to you the other day. To consolidate our thoughts, he says, I think your first book should be called The Science of Spirituality. Okay, because I had another title. I had many other titles. He says, written for a girl like Rebecca from Cal Lutheran. Now he's mentioning a particular girl that was coming to some meetings. He says 200 pages, somewhere between Eckhart Tolle, Deepak Chopra, and Bill Bryson. Do you know who Bill Bryson is?
No.
I'm sorry?
He wrote a book about walking the Appalachian Trail.
Yeah, Bill Bryson has written maybe 15 or 20 books, and they're always fun to read and interesting. And a lot of them were travel books, like, you know, about traveling through America or traveling through Australia or traveling. But he writes books about cooking and about history and about science and so on. And he writes them very funny and very light and very engaging. And it wouldn't matter what he wrote about. Bill Bryson could write a book right now about how you make that carpet. And you'd read the first paragraph and you'd have to read the whole book. Because he'd get, so he just has a knack for doing that. So he says he wants me to write a book like Eckhart Tolle and Deepak Chopra, which are about spiritual things, but in the style of Bill Bryson. Do you think I can do that? I don't know.
Yeah.
No, well, it's like, okay. He says,
we hold our judgment.
Yeah, I hold my judgment too, but that's what he said. He says the thesis of the book should be, quote, we are essentially spiritual beings. Our physical lives and realities have scientific laws, but there are other laws that govern our true hidden spiritual nature. The physical world is a reflection of this spiritual reality. What do you think? Do you think that's a good thesis?
That's exactly what you've been talking
He
about.
took it from me. He took it from one of my talks. But I'm going to read it to you again, because this is what he wants me to write about. He says, we are essentially spiritual beings. Our physical lives and realities have scientific laws, but there are other laws that govern our true, hidden, spiritual nature. The physical world is a reflection of this spiritual reality. Okay?
Right.
How many of you would read a book if you read that at the cover of the book? Would that attract you? To be honest. Everyone.
I think it's too heavy
Yeah, it's too
to
heavy.
catch your eye to try to read.
Okay,
You
what is
have
he?
to come up with
What
a-
is he trying to say there?
He's trying to say that the physical world is a reflection of the spiritual world.
Yes.
But I think we have to find one catchphrase that would
Statement.
Or an
Yeah,
analogy. You need
Well,
an
what
analogy.
he's trying to say here, I mean, is that there are physical laws, and just as there are physical laws, there are spiritual laws. And that we should understand that spirituality is something that is just as concrete and just as law-driven as the physical world is, and that one world is a reflection of the other. That's really what he's saying.
So if in the book you say the key to spiritual laws,
Yes.
maybe that,
Now, he says to me, I asked him, I said, why did you focus on that? Because this was in many of my talks. He said, this is an idea that he doesn't see in all the other writers. He says, that a lot of them are talking about spirituality, but the idea that there are spiritual law and the physical law is a reflection of it, he thinks is new and different, and it might be a contribution to that field. But anyway, I'm going to keep going, I'm going to read what you said, and anytime you disagree with him, I want you to tell me, because I'm going to call him and say, I market tested your letter, and see what it is. He says, this book will be introducing many key concepts and ideas that you will later explore in other subsequent books. Do not use up all your ideas in the first book. Okay? Now, all is in all caps. I hate people, do you like people that write in all caps, or every now and then?
everything is in all caps?
No,
or
every
he
now
wants
and
to
then they put a word.
emphasize?
Every now
Yeah,
and then
that's
they
the
put a
deal.
word. You like that?
Oh, absolutely.
I hate it.
Why?
I don't know. It's just to me.
He's trying to tell you, I mean this.
Okay, so he's got all. He says, do not use up all your ideas in all caps. Okay, like spoon feed me. So basically, he's not really writing me a letter about what to write. He's writing me a letter about what not to write, isn't he? Because he knows darn well. Because I've sent him several emails about drafts and outlines of books, and he said, no, it's too much. He says, subsequent book ideas are forgiveness, the essence of joy, love, unity, a history of God, the mystery of dreams, etc. So basically he's saying, don't write about all those things.
Mystery of dreams?
Mystery of, he called it the mystery of dreams.
Dreams.
I told him the mysterious phenomena of dreams, because I like dreams, and I wanted dreams to be in my first book.
He doesn't want that?
He just took it out. Okay, and he took out forgiveness, and he took out joy, and he took out love, and he took out unity. He took all these out of this first book. Not that he says I can't write about it, but he says these are for other books.
Well, why can't you why can't you do an overview like you've done here the last few weeks? You do an overview and you sort of touch on it to where you become interested in that, and then your next book goes into that in a lot of detail.
You mean foreshadowing?
Yeah. So you talk about dreams and you get people interested in it, and you show the
All right.
connections and all that, just enough that they're saying, I got to have that next book. I want to dig more into that.
All right, so I'm glad you're recording this, because I want to get all these ideas and point out to him that you can foreshadow, like you can say, these are other components to the complete panorama of spirituality that we can't cover in this book. And exactly, okay, that's good. So then he goes on to say, keep it simple, stupid, which is KISS. You know,
KISS.
Yeah, well, he writes it in all caps, by the way.
He's good. He's been to management school.
Yeah.
What's that?
As far as he says it's 8:30, just assume it's all
He
caps.
says KISS, or keep it simple, stupid.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, I got that. Okay, I didn't like it, but he said keep it simple, stupid. And then now he starts to write the whole book for me. So now I want you. He says the book will center around several dynamic modes of storytelling. Okay. Number 1, personal stories. Number 2, scientific metaphors and allegories. Number 3, examples from psychology, history, and sociology.
That's exactly what you do.
Yeah, that's what you've been doing. Is
That's exactly what you do.
Personal story? I haven't told any personal stories.
All your personal stories
When?
about your father and we going to Australia and living there and the war and all that stuff.
I had no intention of putting any of that in any book.
Well, but you told us.
I told you, but I
I
never...
didn't want it in the book. Okay, but he wants it in the book.
What do you think, personal stories in books?
Well, you could go too far with your personal stories. It's all about you. But I think one every once in a while, personal, I think it's good.
The personal stories need to be more about the subject and not about you.
Yes.
In other words, how you came to realize it.
How it affected you. How it affected
All right.
you. Why are you thinking the way you're thinking?
So you have no problem with that?
Kind of gives a point of view, so you can kind of make other people intrigued.
Yes. Well,
That's your point.
many of the books that I read that he gave me to read, the entire book is really just a biography of an autobiography of the person about how they came to realize a particular truth. They said, I went to India and I did this and that, and then I realized this, and then I went. So many people, they use biography as a means of explaining spiritual truth. So I think maybe that's what he's getting at. So you have no problem with that?
Yes, I do.
You do. Why do you have a problem?
If somebody wants to say his biography, because you know what, Tom, the talks you're making, you are getting information from the holy writings. It's not your own thing. This is not your own invention. You're taking the, I'm sure from all the holy writings and more from the Baha'i writings, and then you take the scientific information and put them together. So this is not from you, but you're sharing this.
Yes.
Whereas a biography of someone is his own self. You're talking about yourself. Whereas
I agree.
I think this is more the thing you're doing. First of all, bringing all the knowledge of all the religions under one banner in unity. This is not something most people do.
Sigojan, but he is...
And the
he is-
science together.
He is saying to personalize. How did you come up with this idea? And he should say, for example, through my experience of this happened to me, and that opened my eyes.
I guess so. But anyway, he says the book has to have personal stories, scientific metaphor, and allegory. That I think I have no problem with, because I can. That's really the work I've been doing. And then he says examples from psychology, history, and sociology. Okay. that make sense? Okay, the first thing that I was thinking about when I was reading this is that you can't write a book on how to become spiritual. In fact, if you were to write a book, the first sentence should probably be, you cannot become spiritual by reading this book. That should be the first sentence. You're laughing, but the reason is that a book cannot make somebody spiritual. Really, you probably would say you cannot become spiritual by reading this book, at least not reading it alone. Because in reality, nobody can achieve this kind of thing without practice and experience and doing things. It would be very much the same if I were to give you a book right now about how to play the piano. Let me say I get the best piano player in history, say Horowitz or someone like that, and he writes a book on how to play the piano, and I give it to Farzin today. And Farzin reads the whole book cover to cover 10 times, never owns a piano, touches a piano. Will he be able to play the piano any better after reading that book?
No.
Would you
Maybe
agree?
a little bit better. But
Yeah, but you're opening the doors and giving people the tools.
Exactly. The point is that in educational theory, they say that there is a cyclical interrelationship between theory and practice. That if you gave someone, well, let's take 3 people. Okay, we'll take Farzin and we'll take his 2 brothers, Farshid and Farhan. Okay, one of them we give a book on how to play the piano, and he reads it over and over again. Another one, we give him a piano, no book. And we say, just go to the piano every day and just pound away and see if you can figure out how to play the piano. And the third person, we say, we're going to read a bit of the book, then we're going to touch the piano, read a book and touch it, and we're going to do a cyclical thing. How much different is the third to the first 2?
more.
Twice.
This is not even twice. It's probably 100 times more, because we call it the cyclical interrelationship, the interdependence of theory and practice. Now, if any of you have ever learned a skill, you've learned architecture, how much is there theory and practice?
All the same. I mean,
You're learning all the time on the job and so on. You're doing dentistry, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. How much is theory, how much is practice?
99% practice.
But there is a lot of theory, isn't there?
Mm-hmm.
And how much more do you understand the theory when you've had a little bit of practice?
A lot more.
And how much more is the practice when you've had the theory? In other words, a little bit of knowledge gives you enough to do something. Then that doing something makes you come back and be able to appreciate and gain more knowledge, which enables you to do that. In other words, a book alone is not sufficient. Would you agree? And so there are a lot of people that are professional spiritual readers, but they may not necessarily be any more loving or any more kind or doing any more good for the world or helping the poor or helping the sick. In other words, they may just feel good about themselves. I like to think of it like a New Year's resolution. Have you ever made a New Year's resolution or a resolution at any time on a birthday or something? Don't you feel really good when you make the resolution?
For 10 minutes.
Well, 10 minutes, 1 minute, but you feel good. In fact, anytime you resolve to do something, you feel good about yourself. Some people, they go every Sunday and feel good about themselves. I'm not going to mention any particular religions. It could be a Saturday, it could be whatever. But in other words, just learning about something and learning that this is important, this is good, we should do this or that, does not necessarily make you any better any more than reading that. So the first thing I have to get the first thing I was thinking about is that if you really want to write a book on spirituality, you have to write a book on what people can do. Would you agree? Mm-hmm. Not what they can believe, not what they can think, but what they can do. And this I don't really know if I can do myself.
we have to inspire them to do it.
Keep going.
Well, I mean, if someone wants to lose weight, they can read a book about losing weight. They need to know what they're gaining from that.
Yes.
You need to inspire them to take all these tools and do something with it.
All right. So
They want to build a house, you inspire them to build a house. Your book has to inspire.
Okay.
If it doesn't inspire anybody to do anything, they'll just go read the next book.
So who is the market for this book then? Because there are some people that we want to inspire to become spiritual. Would you agree?
Mhm.
Some people in the world that are not, or they're not sufficiently motivated. And there's other people that really want to be spiritual, and they go and buy these books.
They need the
They
tools.
seek out these books, and they're looking for what to do. And these people are looking to motivate. You're saying that this book should be more motivational.
There's a difference in
And how-
motivation. There's a difference in motivation and inspiration.
Okay, tell me the difference. I know what I think is the difference. But no, but I'm trying
Getting
to
too heavy now.
No, but you tell me the difference. Because I do have my own ideas, because I've thought about this a lot too.
How do you think about this one a little bit?
Okay.
Inspire and motivate.
When you motivate someone, because I agree with you that when I inspire someone to inspire, I can inspire you tonight. Let's say I did. I can inspire you tonight. But does that necessarily result in action?
No.
Okay. But motivate means that I caused you, that's what the term motivate means. So some people are inspirational speakers or inspirational writers, and some people get hooked on them. Every week they listen to them or they tune in on YouTube and they get inspired. But a motivational speaker, a motivational writer, in addition to inspiring, causes you to act. Because that's what motivation means.
Yeah, but I wouldn't get caught up trying to do everything. I mean,
Okay, but the point is that how,
Everybody.
in other words, how can I get Farzin, I'm just picking Farzin because he happens to be there, to actually do something? I could get him to nod his head 100 times tonight and agree with every point I made. But, maybe. Okay, I'm just saying. But if he does nothing more tomorrow to change the world or help the
book
poor,
has failed.
I'm sorry?
The book has failed.
Okay, then what good was my inspiring Farzin?
yeah, but Farzin may get inspired to go talk to other people and do
Okay.
the same thing. Maybe
Well,
he's-
that is action then. Then he is
that's
doing
action, but he's not. Maybe he's not out, forgiving and praying and all these things that he's do, but he's out motivating others to do it. Now that may be.
So you
I mean,
think
I see no harm in. I think people to me that get things out of books, they have something in their personal life that they can immediately relate to it. They're trying to deal with issues somehow.
Okay.
And they're trying to put one and one together and try to figure out what two is. And I think that's when things they say, well, I can do this. This will change my life.
Probably
Or
also in a book try to give them tools.
yeah, the
And
tools.
use those tools to give the examples of personal examples. That I use these tools and this happened.
All
You
right.
know what I mean?
Do you think that my desire to somehow write a book that doesn't just talk about spirituality, but gives somebody something to do is a good thing or not?
Of course.
It goes back to the comment I made earlier. I guess it seems to me that your first book would be da 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 da, and you're dipping into everything a little bit. But you're trying to inspire them. What you're trying to do is now inspire them to dig deeper by reading the next book and really learning about dreams and writing their dreams down and interpreting their dreams or whatever.
Okay.
Or forgiveness. Then they really dig into it because somebody's going to have, of these 10 subjects you have, they're going to dive, well, some will dive into all of them, but some are going to say, I've had these weird dreams. I really want to understand them. I'm going to get this book. Now they understand that there's a connection in spirituality and dreams. That's a big connection a lot of people have to make right there.
So what you're saying now is that I'm trying to define the forest
Yeah,
first.
yeah.
And then when they're looking at the trees, they see
Then they
this
get into it and
relationship
you
to the
give them, here's a couple tools and here's a little this and here's a little personal experience. But then they buy your next book on dreams and they're really digging into how to use that,
Okay.
how to write it down, more tools, more experiences, because you're really interested in it. You see a connection that you need right then. You need it right then.
Does anyone have any comments on what he's saying there?
I think you want to go for more of a revelation type of understanding from your readers.
What do you mean by revelation type of understanding?
Something that's just going to click in them, that's going to make them realize and understand what you're trying to open their eyes to.
Okay. All right. Now I'm going to continue on with his letter and see, because I need to get a copy of this, just the audio of it, because I want to analyze this and think about it. He says lots of quotes from great thinkers. He says he wants me to quote from great thinkers, and he says Carl Sagan, Einstein, Tyler Desjardins, Mother Teresa, George Carlin. The tone should be uplifting, inspiring, oh good, he puts that in, thought-provoking, unacademic. He wants it unacademic, and above all humorous, written for people who define themselves as spiritual but not religious. How many of you people agree with that?
The only part I disagree with is the part about being unacademic, because I think you brought up some very good examples of the scientific nature of things, which becomes very academic. You can't explain them otherwise. Also.
Yeah, and I think his reference to Bill Bryson is interesting, because Bill Bryson writes about academic subjects in a non-academic style. So it's the ability to speak about things but not use the
Layman's
lingo.
language, that's it, that's right.
Yeah, layman's language. More like journalistic style than a book style. I think that's what he meant. So now he says, your assignment now is to outline every chapter and 3 or 4 points that you want to make in every chapter. Here are some of the chapters that I want you to write. So now he's giving me the chapter. Now, when we come to them, I'm going to read them, and I want to discuss them briefly with you. He says, one chapter should be called Human Spiritual Evolution. The idea that we can evolve individually as a race and a culture, and tracing your personal spiritual evolution and humanity's evolution from caveman to present time. Oh, not Mike. He says your pro. Okay, tracing your personal spiritual evolution and humanity's evolution. Okay, so basically he's saying that spiritual evolution is possible and that we should understand this. How many of you think that's a good chapter in a book? How many think it's not?
I don't understand.
I don't really understand how do you analyze a caveman spirituality? How do you
I think what he's saying
He didn't have one.
Well, I know, but I mean,
Can you say that again?
I think what I'm going to read it again because this is the letter, and I'm glad that you're finding it as hard to understand as I am. Okay.
there are many groups like the
He
Native
says,
Americans that were
human
much more
spiritual
spiritual.
evolution, by the way, in all caps. Okay, the idea that we can evolve individually and as a race and culture. Let's
I
take
kind of
that.
like that.
You like that?
I think of it society-wise and also religious-wise, in the religious-wise. Like, as a society, we've gained more laws, more order, more stability. And in religious terms, we've also gained more laws and stability. So it makes more sense.
Okay. The idea of spiritual evolution or human evolution spiritually is kind of interesting right now because there are many people that think human nature, quote unquote, is unalterable. That you cannot change human nature, that we were warlike, for 6,000 years and we're going to be warlike for 100,000 years more, that it's just kind of like human nature. And human nature has this and this and that. And the interesting thing is that it is modern science that has now decided that human nature is unalterable. And yet modern science completely embraces evolution in the physical sense. You know that evolution, we believe that human beings have evolved and all plants and animals and nature has evolved, but they don't believe in evolution in terms of spirituality. Either that you as an individual can be more spiritually evolved than your ancestors, or that your descendants can be more spiritually evolved than you. They also don't believe that society can evolve. And he believes that spiritual evolution is taking place right now on a grand scale, and this is a broad theme. How many of you like that idea and you think we should write a chapter about that in our book?
Wow.
Just one? How many think we should not?
I think it's key.
You think it's key?
I think it's probably the most critical point.
The concept of spiritual evolution?
Because one thing that I've always didn't understand is why, I don't know if anybody disagrees with me here, just let me know. Do we all believe that everything in this planet will evolve over time? Everything, down to the smallest grain of sand, that sand molecule will evolve with time.
Yes.
So why is it that religion is the only thing on this planet that does not evolve, cannot evolve?
Right.
Because we have these individuals that are stuck to a religion from 10,000 years ago, and it seems as though over time that religion isn't, that word of that religion has changed, I would believe, given the number of sects and religions that form from it. But I don't think that's a form of evolution. I think evolution is more towards you bring in something new, a new trait. There are those that take it. there are those that don't take it and stick with the old, and it kind of evolves that way.
Okay. And what he's saying here, he says you need to trace personal spiritual evolution within an individual. So every individual, you and you all go through your own personal evolution, whatever that is, at whatever stage. And he says, and also humanity's societal evolution from caveman to present time. In other words, there's been two forms of spiritual evolution. One is each individual in their life. I want to ask you once again, do you think that's a good subject?
Let me ask you a question. Aren't there those that would argue that we are much, as mankind, we're much less spiritual than we were 400 or 500 years ago? I mean, I'm thinking about the Native Americans, they worship the clouds and the earth, and, there was more, they thought they were more spiritual than we are now. There's a group of people. Huh? They respected the earth. But I'm thinking about, there's a lot of groups back then that I think just had a better connection with, there's obviously more wars and things going on, but they just seem to have a better connection with, they were more spiritual than we are today.
I would agree, and this is the common belief of historians, that they look at the world today and they say we are less spiritual or more material, however you look at it, today than at any other time since maybe the decline and fall of the Roman Empire. But the interesting thing is if you look at all the meta-historians are historians that look at many civilizations, like Arnold Toynbee or Will and Ariel Durant and so on, they find that all civilizations go through cycles. And they have a birth, and they have a cycle, and they become very, very spiritual, very united, and it might last 400 or 500 years, 1,000 years, and so on. The Mayans, for example, or so on. And then they always have a decline. And the decline always ends up in a collapse of civilization. In fact, no civilization has lasted forever. They rise and fall constantly. And so the rise and fall. Right now, there is a group of scientists and sociologists called the Club of Rome. Have you heard of them?
No.
Well, they were formed in the late 1970s because they were all sociologists and historians. They're the most famous in the world. Irving Laszlo started it, probably the greatest philosopher of our time. And he started because all the historians and philosophers said that everything that existed at the worst decay of the Roman Empire exists today. They look very scientifically or historically, and they say that all the things that caused the decay and the downfall of that exist today. So this is like a serious warning that we're also going to collapse too. If they collapsed, and they had all the things, and we're the same. So they started a club called the Club of Rome, and it became probably one of the most influential academic philosophical groups. Then they later on changed their name. I can't remember why. To the Club of some other city. Does anyone remember?
No.
The last 10 or 15 years. Anyway, but they write and they publish.
Maybe Club Med?
No, not Club Med. I want to say the Club of some other city instead of Rome. But anyway, so they would agree with you that right now the world is not particularly spiritual, and maybe less so than ever before. And you would have to look in the world and say yes. But at the same time, isn't there something amazing about the time we live in terms of the advances in science and technology and the coming together and the potential unity of men? Would you not see as many good things as bad things right now?
Mm-hmm.
And this is an interesting thing because it means that evolution is always caused by challenges and problems and trying to overcome them. So an animal evolves when it goes to a frontier. Like, for example, an animal has a particular way of eating or something like that, but if they migrate too far, the environment gets different. It might be more snowy or it might be warmer. So that animal has to do different things based on what it did, and the animal evolves. And that's why tigers suddenly become white. Not suddenly, but after hundreds of thousands of years they become white because they adapt to their snowy environment, or grizzly bears become white because they adapt and so on. So problems and difficulties are a force for evolution. This is what he's saying. So, I'm going to ask you, if you had a book and there was a whole subject on spiritual evolution, would you keep reading the book? Yeah.
Depends how interesting it is.
Got you pretty interesting?
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
how interesting
Wow.
to make it that the reader likes to know what happened, why is it this, you know?
So, but anyway, that's his first chapter. I'm going to think about it, and I'll try to write it to him like a 15-page this week. Chapter
Go
2.
back to the story.
Yes.
The one thing that you mentioned about the people not believing that war has always existed and we will continue to have wars,
Yes.
that is an interesting point for a lot of people to become aware that would it be possible for us to stop fighting?
Okay, how many of you believe that human nature is unalterable? But either collective or individual, or that it can evolve and change? How many of you think it's unalterable? I mean, there's many people that argue this. Many.
They're those weirdos.
No. Many scientists believe.
How can you say that human nature is not... I mean, we get mice and we do some things with them and change their habits.
That's true.
Why couldn't we do that for human beings?
Because psychology says so.
Because that's
That's-
the way we've always acted.
But doesn't it come down to nature versus nurture? The way you're brought up instead of your surroundings?
So do you think that education, which is the primary force of nurture, could alter human nature? How many of you agree with that?
So can you say that again, please?
He said that nature versus nurture. In other words, nature is the forces within us that we inherit that we can't change, and nurture is the forces that we educate. So you were born with certain tendencies, and you may not be able to overcome them to a certain extent, and then there's other things we can help you overcome. And he's saying nurture beats nature. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
And other people say nature beats nurture. Who agrees with that, or who thinks that they're both forces that we have to contend with? It's a very complex subject.
I thought that the current science was that nature trumps nurture
Exactly. You're exactly right.
by many factoids.
This is exactly what I'm reading in everything I read.
Okay.
Yes.
On human being or on deer and...
Human beings, when we talk about human behavior,
Yeah.
human interaction and so on.
that the nature...
I mean, we've been battling with
Yes, this is what we call
materialism,
behaviorism.
power for thousands of years. And to me, it's
Skinner
not changing.
in the 1950s and 60s saying behaviorism, we have to study this. So this is a very interesting
So
subject.
Tom, you know what Abdu'l-Baha says about this nature and nurture?
Mhm.
He says that, imagine on the Persian carpet, when they want to make a Persian carpet, it has the lines that are,
The warp and the woof.
yes, and there are those that are the other side. Abdu'l-Baha says the one that are go down is nature, the things you inherit, and the other part, the ones opposite to that, is nurture.
Uh-huh.
And then Abdullah says the carpet weaver, that is us, the choices we make and the colors we choose is our choice, is the human free choice of making the carpet to weave what design they want. And Abdullah says sometimes by nature you may have some strings that are torn. You know, hereditary wise you may have some problems, or by nurture you may grow in a house that there may be lacking some threads. But still, the person that has the choice of choosing the carpet and making will do its best, and the one who doesn't do its best, the design will affect the person's life.
Okay, so
That is
basically,
what I remember.
yeah, so life is like a Persian carpet.
It could be.
Yeah, well, no, that's very good. So, but you're attracted to the idea of at least discussing whether or not human nature, particularly spirituality, is subject to evolution or is permanent. So that's one chapter he wants me to write. His second chapter, because I want to get through it, he says he doesn't really say chapter 2, it's the next one. And by the way, they're always in all caps. Okay, so I got it somehow. He says
He's trying to drill something in your head.
He says the spiritual world and the physical world. Okay, and then he puts in brackets getting to room 217. Now I don't think that I ever used the room 217, but did I ever give a talk where I
in
used
one
it?
of your speeches.
But it wasn't 217.
Well, he changes the room.
He changed
because
the
he's
room.
a Hollywood. 217.
Okay, but basically what he's talking about here is the fact that many of us do not think that we're in two worlds. We just think we're in the one world. We're in this box. let's call this box the physical world box. Last week, I asked you to imagine a world of people that were in a box. And if they were completely in the box. By the way, we were just watching The Matrix today, so this is a very good. But imagine a whole world of little tiny creatures in a box. And everybody's in the box, and nobody knows anything outside the box. And everybody in the box says, don't even go near the walls of the box, because they're just stuck in the box. Now those people you're going to say, there's a world outside the box, and they will say, you have to prove the world outside of the box from within the box. Can it be proven?
No.
No, you cannot prove the world outside the box from within the box. So let's just say you live in the box world, and everybody tells you don't even go near the walls of the box. And you go, maybe you're very small, so maybe it takes a few days, and you go to the wall of the box, and you get close to the wall of the box, and you listen, and you can hear some sound from outside the box. And you go back and you tell your parents, I heard there's something beyond the box. And they say, we told you not to go there. Okay, that's kind of what materialism today. Materialism is a little box that they've put us in. And they say, you have to prove the existence of God from within the box. You have to prove the existence of the soul from within the box. You have to prove that there's life after death from within the box. And basically they have set up a self-defeating argument. There's no way you can beat them in that argument, because once they've decided that you can't physically see it, you can't physically test it or so on, it doesn't exist, basically then there's no spirituality. So my question to you then is, how do we know if we live in the physical box that we're in the Matrix? How many of you have seen the Matrix? How do they figure out that they're in the Matrix when they're in the Matrix? How do they do it?
They take a pill.
They take a pill.
The blue pill or the red pill.
Okay, and that enables you to see beyond the box, so to speak. Would you agree?
That.
Okay.
You up.
Okay. We don't have that pill. Would you agree? So let's just get this right. We live in a physical world, and I'm telling you now there's a spiritual world. Raise your hand if you agree that there is something outside the box. Who agrees? Why do you agree? What proof do you have? Did you take a pill? Why do you agree?
It reminds me of the movie Truman. Did you ever see the movie Truman?
Yes, true. Actually, these are two really good spiritual movies. We should get them one day and play them here and watch them.
So Truman was in the box, but I think what happened, and it's probably true, I was thinking about that, but it's probably true of spirituality. Whether it's coincidences, you run into things in your life, you say, how did that happen? Why is that? Well, it must be something else out there.
So you believe that there must be something more because certain things happen.
Like Truman, he'd see coincidences and things. Little things would happen, he would go, something's out there, I know.
You ever see that movie?
No.
The Truman Show?
Oh, you've got to see Truman. It's a great movie.
It's similar to The Matrix, but instead they take one creature, not a creature, they take a human being, and they make a TV show about him, but they raise him from birth, like he comes out of the womb.
Everybody watches the show.
And so they create a phony world of TV sets and everything, and he doesn't realize, he thinks it's the real world, and they keep cameras on him, like dozens and dozens of cameras, and everybody watches him grow, and he thinks it's a real world, but it's a phony world that they've created.
But what I noticed that these two have in common is that it's all about one individual, and that one individual, that movie, Truman, is you. Just like he's every single one of us, just like Neo is you know?
I don't want to be Neo.
You want to be Neo because he's awesome. These movies are talking about an individual that represent us. And it's basically showing us to get outside of this box.
Yeah.
And the question is, whoever made the movie, how did they get outside the box to create such a movie?
I want to ask you this question because I believe there's a way to get outside the box. But
The way to get outside of the box is to have faith.
Okay, but that's easy to say.
Well, it's easy to say. If you want to get outside the box, the same way, if you want to get outside of the box, take the blue pill or red pill. I'm telling you, if you want to get outside the box, you have to start with faith. Once you have the faith, then the manifestation of God will lead you and educate you by reading their writings how to get outside the box.
Or the combination, it is the faith, and you see, you as Truman, you see the changes. There are some anomalies or whatever, and you think, well, there must be something else, and so you have therefore the faith.
Okay.
The combination.
So how many of you think that's a good chapter in the book?
I don't think it's so much faith as it is for each individual may be different. For one person, it could be music. For another person, it could be traveling. Like,
Yeah, but that's too much out there for me. This is.
So go back. What's the chapter? I lost.
His first chapter was Human Spiritual Evolution. His second chapter was called The Spiritual World and the Physical World. And he says, learning to recognize that there are these two worlds and that there is more to it. My feeling is that you actually can see spiritually, that you actually are a spiritual being. In other words, you are a soul and a body. And the soul is attached to the body. And just as the body can see the physical world, the soul can see the spiritual world. In other words, the physical body only sees within the box, but the spiritual eyes can see the spiritual world. The spiritual ears can hear the spiritual world. And that we need to awaken our spirituality, our spiritual sense. This is what I feel.
Well, how about through dreams? Because that's got to be another physical world or a spiritual world, because you can't actually touch it. You never know where you really are.
You're absolutely right. Did you come to our class on dreams here?
Yes.
I think you're absolutely right, because even in our faith, Baha'u'llah, he says that dreams are the best proof of the existence of the spiritual world. Now, Rainn Wilson doesn't want me to get into dreams in this book. Mm-hmm. And yet, he's eliminating what she's echoing what Baha'u'llah says, is that the dreams prove to you that there is a world outside the box. Because without your eyes, you see. Without your ears, you hear. Without your hands, you touch. And so on. So I think this is good. Let's go. I think that chapter I'm going to write for sure. The spiritual evolution chapter I'm not. Let's go to chapter 3. He says chapter 3 is, quote, what is spirituality? In all caps again. What is spirituality? And he puts in brackets, seeing the gorilla. Now, I think, did I already talk to you about seeing the gorilla?
Yes.
How many of you were here? How many of you were here when I saw seeing the gorilla? Okay. The point about seeing the gorilla, there have been many tests that human beings don't see very well. I don't know if you know this. You don't see very much. And they call this inattentional blindness. And there's a lot of research on it that people don't see very well. And as a result, you think you're catching things and you're not. So they did a simple test with people where they had a gorilla walking down the street. Not a real gorilla. It was a man in a gorilla suit. He walked down the center of the street, and there were cars going 3 or 4 lanes on this side and 3 or 4 on that side. And he walked down the middle, and they took a video of it. And the video lasted for 15 or 20 minutes. And they gave university-age students the task of counting the cars. They said, count all the cars. And it was like hundreds of cars. You had to count. And as they were counting the cars, a gorilla walked right down the middle. Big gorilla. Now, if you see the video and you see the gorilla, it's as plain as can be. Just as plain as can be. But then they interviewed the people who were counting the cars. I can't remember the percentage, but it was in the high 80s or 90s. Didn't see the gorilla. They said, how many cars you counted? Is it 115? So, did you see a gorilla? No, there's no gorilla. They showed them the video, and they showed the gorilla walking down. And they say, you're lying, you didn't play that tape. But of course they did. And all of this is documented. You can see it on the internet and so on. And we call that now seeing the gorilla, because they found that you don't see something when you're concentrating on something else, even though the thing is easy to see. It's not hard to see the gorilla. Seeing the spiritual world is not hard to see. It's just that we are concentrating and focusing on the physical world and material things. It's nothing to do with the hardness of seeing one thing. It's the fact that we're doing something else. Okay, that's what he means by the concept of seeing the gorilla. So he puts that in quotes there. Okay, there it is. Seeing the gorilla. Now he says here, what is spirituality? Seeing the gorilla. Redefine the term for today's American housewife. It's a broad term that is misunderstood in all sorts of ways. What is the true definition? He's talking about of spirituality. It is not religious. It is not New Age. It is not hippy-dippy, he writes. What does he mean by hippy-dippy? What do you think he means?
Vietnam stuff.
What is that?
Vietnam.
Okay. Do you agree with that? That we need to redefine the word spirituality because people don't know what it means?
I agree.
Yeah.
So do you think that chapter is a good one?
Yeah.
We've got two good chapters, okay. This third chapter, he just says the metaphor of games and sports. Because I guess I gave that talk one time and you heard it. Do you like that metaphor? How many were here when I talked about games? Do you think that would be a good chapter in a book?
Yeah, it is very good.
Really?
What was it about?
But I forgot what it was about.
You were here.
No, I didn't raise my hand. Did I?
But you were at the game. Sorry, you were at the game. You were at the talk. Basically, I took a statement and said that life is a bit like a game. And we looked at baseball and golf and stuff because many of the things about a game are that one is you have to constantly know your opponent and you have to know what is good, what scores, what doesn't score. You have a set amount of time and then it's over and the score is taken, which is very much like life. In other words, there were many similar analogies. Do you remember that?
To our life.
Life in a game, and so on. And so I used that analogy, I think, for a whole lot. He says that should be one chapter. How many think that should be one chapter in the
Yeah,
book?
it was nice.
I think it should be one because people associate whatever you're trying to prove. If you're doing it through sports, you're going to have a lot of people reading that.
Okay.
But isn't that something you do as an experience that goes through the whole book to make analogies rather than
Yeah.
one chapter on sports?
Yeah, I can see what he's getting at here. He wants a simple book, and he wants one chapter that's like an article in a magazine or a newspaper that stays on one thing, and we read that. And you could even just take that and email that one chapter, and it would stand on its own. So you see, he's thinking very journalistically.
Mm-hmm.
He's not thinking like a big, long book. He's thinking about little units. And so he says, one is what is spirituality. In other words, the modern day and age we live in with the blogging and stuff like that, people don't write books anymore. They write thoughts. Would you agree? Is that how the world is thinking? Is that you work in the blogosphere, right? Is that how people work? So I think that's what he's getting at.
But I think, Tom, there's also a book, this book can be very heavy, okay? Really, you have to concentrate and think about it. And if it's a long one, people are not going to go through it. But if you've got each subject in a 75-page book, that could be by itself one that people can read and it's not that long. And then later on put it all together.
Yes. Okay. Okay. So, but how many of you like the idea of having a chapter on games and sport? Because I can write that. Okay, the next one he says, the garden metaphor. That's all he puts. The garden metaphor.
I assume it's capital?
Yes, it is.
Yes.
The garden metaphor, but he's got a question mark after it.
That's the weed thing?
Well, no, actually, because I don't think he heard. Basically, there in some of the talks I gave, I pointed out that human nature is naturally wild. It's naturally wild, but it can be cultivated. In the same way, if you look at a garden, if you look at a forest or wilderness, it's not particularly ordered, but it has nature. And you can't change the nature, but you can cultivate it. And you can make a beautiful garden. For example, all the foods you eat, every food you eat, its wild form is really not very tasty. Have you ever tasted a wild carrot? A wild carrot is smaller than your pinky, and it's bitter. Okay, but human beings have taken nature and they have slowly, by crossbreeding and stuff, they've made the carrot bigger and they've made it sweeter. And every plant is like that. And every garden is like that. Now, if you leave a garden, what is it like? Not a garden, if you just leave wilderness, how does it look? And how beautiful is a beautiful English garden or something?
Or Japanese?
Okay. This is what I talked about spirituality. Spirituality says that you cannot change. In other words, a gardener cannot defeat nature. Can he? He can only mold and guide it.
That's sort of Ziba's Persian rug deal, isn't it?
Sorry?
That's Ziba's Persian rug
We can
example.
manipulate it, and of course today we can manipulate it more than we used to be able to. But what I was saying is that spirituality is not fighting human nature. It's not. It's taking it and just elevating it. Yes, that's what you understand. It's regulating and controlling it for beauty, but it's not suppressing it. We shouldn't try to suppress our animal nature and our physical nature, or think that we need to go and live in caves or monasteries or so on. This is all part of the garden analogy. Do you like that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The next one.
Then why was it that the Native Americans, like you were saying earlier, they had nothing but nature around them, and they were probably the most spiritual, friendly?
Garden. To me, the garden is the single most spiritual thing you can get at. You can learn every lesson in life by meditating on farming and gardens. Believe me, I know, because I grew up amongst people that farm and garden, and I believe it. So no, I believe that you can learn a lot from the way in which plants grow, and the way in which you do seeds and soil and watering and nurturing plants. You can learn everything about human spiritual growth, and you can become very close. And it's very true that many of the cultures that are close to nature have been quite spiritual. So okay, I agree with that. The next one, he says, supply and demand, ? And I have no idea what that means. I don't ever recall speaking on that subject, and that's all it says, supply and demand. What do you think he means?
He's probably trying to say that you only give people as much as they want to. Or maybe you should give them more than what they're asking for.
But what does supply and demand actually mean in terms of economics? Who can tell us?
It means you make as much of a product as the public wants. And as marketing starts to go down, you make less of it because it's not as wanted as it was when it was first created.
The least there is of it, the more the people want it.
It's about equilibrium.
As far as he only made 2 tacos a day, he could sell them for $50.
If nobody else would make tacos. In other words, if the whole world and tacos and his supply, he would make more. See, that's your problem.
You're making too many.
But why did Rainn Wilson put supply and demand in as a chapter in a book about spirituality? I don't even know myself. I don't want to ask.
You need to ask him.
You think I need to ask him? Does anyone have any ideas?
Probably because some people, they want to learn, but they don't want to learn that much because they keep trumps when they already believe.
Huh.
Maybe some sort of limitation.
I'm going to have to ask him. Do you have any ideas?
Well, I think that maybe he's talking about the demand for spirituality increasing in our generation.
The demand for spirituality?
The demand for spirituality. People are more